Welcome to ReModel, Tales of Marketing Transformation. I'm Victoria Fox, CEO of AAR, and in this series we sit down with the CMOs reshaping how modern marketing works. Not the theory, but the real operating models that unlock speed, creativity and commercial impact. Each episode follows our framework of people, process, platforms and partners, the four levers that determine whether marketing flies or fails. Today we're joined by Mark Vile, a marketeer whose work has genuinely shaped popular culture. Mark spent 18 years at Compare the Market, where he was the driving force behind one of the most successful and enduring marketing ideas of the last 2 decades, the Meerkats. So let's get into it, Mark. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Today we're going to unpack all of your time at Compare the Market, but I just wanted to congratulate you on your new role starting at Olsen Cruises, and it'd be great to hear what's exciting you about that new role.
Massively excited. I'm terming it from quotes to boats, basically, is kind of how I'm viewing it. Very excited.
Very lucky to have you.
Thank you very much.
You had an incredible journey at Compare the Market, and 18 years is a long time. That was probably 5 jobs in one. I'd love to hear how the role of marketing evolved in that time.
Yeah, I mean, it massively changed, and I think they were just every 2 to 3 years just felt like a different phase, and hence I never set out to be there for 18 years, but every time you looked at the next 2 or 3 years ahead, then there's always something exciting there. I think if you look at marketing and how it changed, and I think you have to bear in mind that it was very much a startup when I was kind of like the third person kind of into the building. But there were 3 really, really distinct phases for me there. The first phase was we just had to be known. We were in a white hot market, and it was all about how do you kind of build a model where media and creative worked hand in hand to deliver against your objectives. And we were in that phase, that took a little while. That was 3-4 years of making sure that we got that stuff right. Yes, there was the brilliant idea coming from VCCP that we had around the Meerkat brand platform, but we had to make sure that kind of media and creative was working well. The nice thing we had in our favour was at this particular point, social media seemed a far more innocent place, and people would just play along with campaigns. So the amplification we got through various platforms at that point was just amazing. We were the first character brand on Facebook, as an example. So that was all about kind of the early years, bringing that together with salience. And
must have been so much fun.
It was great fun, and it was literally like we couldn't get the ideas into execution quick enough. The number of ideas that we had internally with our agencies as well, it was fantastic. It was great fun, and we just knew that we had to keep going. We knew we were onto something good. I think the second phase, and it's kind of as marketing development, MarTech kind of came to the fore, was all about, we didn't just talk about our brand asset being powerful, we started to talk about our data asset being really, really powerful. And that really was kind of the period where you had to have brand and technology working hand in hand together as you do now. But it was fascinating going through all of that as well, and suddenly realising the power of the data asset and how you could use that. Sure you remember the terms like big data as well. I don't really ever sure what that actually meant, but
no one did.
No idea. It's all about what that meant. But fundamentally for us, we knew that kind of that customer asset and that data that we had, particularly as a comparison site, was going to be massively valuable for us moving forward. And how do we work with that alongside kind of the brand that we had? And then I think you're into kind of the phase we have been probably for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's difficult to give it kind of a title or a badge, really. You've just got proliferation of different channels, different opportunities as a marketeer, and technology kind of coming on at pace and dealing with AI. So I think it's a very, very different phase of marketing, and there's slight complexity. It's not just as easy as saying, let's get brand and data working hand in hand together. There's a multitude of things that you now need to think about and bring together. But you can see it as opportunity, but I think, honestly as well, there's also the slight overwhelm of the number of channels and the number of things that you now have to look at as a marketing leader. Put it really simply, marketing over the last 18 years has evolved from a point where all you had to do was get media and creative working hand in hand together to a point now where you have a multitude of different options, and you need to build teams that know how to collaborate to make all of this stuff happen.
As it got more complex and more proliferated in terms of channels, the stakeholders that you were engaging with, did that really widen? Did that become more than when you started out?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of stakeholder engagement, then I think it stayed pretty similar. I think what I noticed is how closely I then really had to work with other members of the executive team. Look, and I thought I was working closely with them before, but you take the last 4 or 5 years, then really you have to be hand in glove with your fellow exec members. Honestly, I think I loved all three phases. They were very, very different in terms of how you had to lead kind of
Yeah.
a marketing function. From being almost like the disruptor when you first started and kind of making sure that you were leading from the front on that disruption, to actually a very different model where you have to make sure that you're coaching, you're cajoling people, you're setting up kind of operating models. And so, yeah, all of them had different phases, which were great. But the thing that I think I was lucky with, particularly with any board interactions or with CEOs I worked with, was that it was quite evident how marketing in its broadest sense, so not just brand, but how marketing in its broadest sense played such a role in developing Compare the Market. And so, yeah, I had a bit of a head start in that everybody understood the importance of the role. So they were always very open, very encouraging conversations, very challenging as well. So, this stuff's not easy. Have to make sure that you are on point in terms of measurability, or at least showing kind of the early signs that things are starting to move. But fundamentally, board conversations and also with fellow exec members were always made easier by the fact everybody understood the power of the brand and the power of marketing for that organisation.
Do you think it's quite useful to have the language of it being a discipline as the marketing operating model and the people, process, platforms and partners being an ecosystem that are interwoven to help to give it the status it needs within marketing?
Yeah, 100%. I come back to those two things that you need to be really successful, which is number one, that strategic thought leadership. How do you get that? Then I think secondly, and we use the phrase of ruthless execution, how do you get an operating model which means you can actually execute quicker and better than your competitors? And so having a joint language and having that documented on a very basic level is massively important, because there's competitive advantage from those two, from that strategic thought leadership and ruthless execution.
Having it documented also helps people to have a North Star if there's a transformation. I would really love to hear about the leadership style you took and the culture that you fostered.
When you're leading a team, I don't think you're ever done on this particular job, or you ever think you've done the perfect job really on this. And I think it's right, because capabilities change so quickly. Every 2 to 3 years, you would have to review the capabilities that you needed. And I think that's moving even quicker. You're almost at the point where every 3 to 6 months, you're probably looking at, are our capabilities now fit for purpose? Take risks, do stuff that your competitors aren't doing. And that takes kind of bravery from those individuals that you're asking that of. And so I think, first of all, you have to create kind of a high trust culture. And there's no easy shortcut to that. Without that high trust, then there is no way that you're going to be able to empower a team to go and deliver the outcomes which we're all collectively into. I think one of the things I've massively learned is the importance of check-ins. And it sounds a very, very simple thing to do, but I strongly believe in kind of the benefit, the power of kind of the collective and actually empowering teams to go and do great stuff. But you do have to make sure as a leader that you have those check-ins, and it's your role to be cheerleader at some points and coach at others. But I think when things have gone wrong for me, it's just when I haven't kind of looked at that end-to-end empowerment and actually made sure you've had the check-ins at the right place.
I've worked with you before, and I think one of the things that I enjoyed most but also challenged most was how much of a pace setter you are. You are someone who really pushes on the brand and the team. And in those moments, are there things that you've done to slow down, to speed up?
Look, it's a key thing that I think across my career I've had to be very conscious of doing. I'll give you a very, very early story, actually. When I started off as a graduate at the post office group, they took us for a team bonding exercise, kind of caving. They got me to do this thing called a super squeeze, like lead the team through. And it's like the tiniest kind of little bit. It's called the polo, and it's a super squeeze where I had to get everyone down. I thought, I'm going to break the record for doing this in the quickest time. And I was literally there pulling my team members through. And kind of when we're debriefing after, and I was getting ready to be very proud of myself, everyone say, well, how well I've done? Then basically everybody said, well, one, I'm claustrophobic, Mark, and you didn't ask how I was going as I was going through this. It was number two, you didn't even say thank you and well done when we'd actually achieved it at the end as well. There were just lessons aplenty on this as well. So
Fantastic.
Look, I've known from kind of early in my career actually to just watch out and look at this stuff. Have I always done it brilliantly? Absolutely not. But hopefully I created an environment where my team could tell me this. And actually looking back, if you look at Compare the Market and everything that the brand achieved and brilliant marketeers that I had in the team and everything that they achieved, then actually the one thing I'd like to go back and do is actually just take that time to celebrate and say, thank you to
So
them as well.
important.
So, and actually say, look, sorry, I'm hopefully they could have told me if I was pulling them through that super squeeze and it didn't feel comfortable, then I'm hoping that they were always able to tell me that wasn't okay for them. So, yeah.
What are the things you think the future marketer really needs to invest in from a capability point of view?
I believe greatly in kind of the T-shaped marketeer where you have a specialism, but you have those great generalist and leadership skills. And so actually one of the things we were looking at was how do we invest more in those leadership skills and actually just some good old fashioned kind of marketing planning, because when all is said and done, so much just comes down to, do you understand your target? Do you understand your audience? And can you actually build plans out the back of that? There's all of the new capabilities, which of course you've got to be up on, but let's think about how we get the next generalist kind of the future.
I couldn't agree more. And our research showed exactly that the biggest gap identified by CMOs was actually traditional marketing, like really strong strategy skills, really strong leadership skills. As we go into the future, AI is going to automate some of the roles. And what we find is we go in and a lot of the teams are really good at doing because that's what we've trained them to do. And they're not as strong as they were in the past at thinking, strategizing and leading.
Which is what we're going to need in the future, because you're right. With AI, the actual doing is going to be done by AI. And actually what we need is the 10% up front, which is human, like the delivery, like there'll be the 80% that will be done by AI. And then there's the 10% kind of out the back, which will be review and make better. And those are kind of where the strategic thinkers will come to the fore.
One of the things I was keen to ask you about was, how do you prioritize what you do rather than fulfill marketing technologies, capabilities? How do you make some of those decisions about prioritizing what the brand needs to do to engage with customers?
This is a really boring answer, but it's actually, you've got to understand what you're trying to achieve as a business, and you've got to then cascade it down within what are you trying to achieve as a marketing team. So it starts with the very boring answer of objectives. And I think once you've got those objectives, then it doesn't become about the technology. The technology is there to enable you to do the activity that will hit those objectives. So objectives down first before you start talking about tools and technology.
The clarity between the business strategy and the marketing strategy, and then therefore the marketing operational strategy to deliver that. Is that something that you were hot on at Compare the Market? And any advice for making sure marketing is totally aligned to the business?
You do just have to spend time on making sure that everybody, like each area and each function, understand the objectives and how they ladder up to the goals of the business. And that takes time, and it takes really clear communication. Because there is no point building an operating model for the wrong stuff fundamentally, and it's quite obvious.
Any advice for people who are stepping up into a board role and ways to build that trust?
I remember our chair once saying that one of the things that I did was I held strong opinions loosely. And I thought, I wasn't sure, was that a compliment? I'm taking it as one. But I think what that means is, look, you have to have a view and you have to have an opinion. But as things change and move quickly, and as you get new data, then don't be afraid to actually shift your view. Don't be precious. I think it's about that. It is fine with a new bit of data to say, actually, that wasn't quite right, or that's different.
Why did you place such high importance on those agency partnerships?
It was by necessity. First off, when you are a startup and there's only a few of you, then actually you have to have. I mean, the agency were not just an extension of the team; they were the team for us as well. There is just great talent within agencies that you want to work with and kind of get the best out of.
And you created the Brains Trust famously, which was bringing the strategic ninjas from your different agencies together, working on your behalf. Can you tell us about the success of that model?
And so the Brains Trust really was to give us that kind of outside perspective and make sure that we weren't getting too close to the category and forgetting what the art of the possible actually was.
That smile test, tell us a little bit about why you put that in.
It was a way of just getting people to actually talk about the quality of the work that we were doing. When we were looking across the raft of all of the work that we were doing, we would look at each piece of communications and say, does that make you smile? It's massively important, that, because it's back to the DNA of our brand. In a dull category, we brought entertainment so that people were engaged and they did kind of pay attention to our brand. And so by just having that smile test on every piece of communication, do we think it makes people smile. You open up a whole raft of different conversations, which would then set a benchmark and actually get people to really start pushing their creative thinking.
Now there's a massive focus on bringing things in-house. How do you feel about that trend, and what do you think should remain with agencies?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I don't think there's a one size kind of answer. A lot of it depends on the capabilities you have internally, the capabilities you're willing to build, and speed. My own view is very much that we've never wanted to be an ad agency. We've never wanted to be a media agency. I think with the advent of marketing technology and having to have that closer to your infrastructure, and I think there's an inevitability that there were just certain marketing activities that would be best done in-house. Even with that, I just think there's a massive role for agencies to play. It may be a slightly different role, but from kind of holding us to account strategically, from being that big thought partner that we need, through to actually working alongside the in-house teams.
You've had some incredible agency partners who have actually gone into the boardroom with you and challenged and pushed things on. Do you think that's changing?
I've always been lucky to have long-standing relationships with the agencies that I've worked with, creative and media, and had some fantastic people. I think it is becoming more difficult for agencies to be more upstream, basically because of everything we've talked about around fragmentation. There's more going on, and also how boards now will focus on measurement. And so I do think we are losing a little bit of the agency power that we used to have in the boardroom, and I'd love to kind of bring that back.
One of the most negative things that we've done as a marketing industry, which is to name it brand and performance. I would love to hear your perspective on this split between brand and performance, how you operated within that, but also some of the observations you have about that split.
What you have to do, and there's just some practical stuff, which is you have to understand that there's kind of different operating models that you're running within the marketing function, and it's all about continuous learning and kind of making sure that you've got the right structures and processes for that learning to actually be executed properly. Make sure that everybody understands the different models that they're working to. Force people to spend time together and understand how everything integrates and how it fits together. Kind of this whole theory, and it's kind of been around a long time, about marginal gains. You probably remember me talking about this before, but so the whole theory about marginal gains, particularly in performance marketing, that I think, look, it's valid, but I think what it's done is allowed marketeers to set quite low benchmarks. Yeah. I think it's beholden on everyone to go, look, is this a time for this business to be looking for marginal gains? And that may be right. But from a disruption point of view, or if you're kind of new into a channel, or you're kind of looking at something new from a proposition point of view, I don't think it is about marginal gains all the time. I think we have to set higher benchmarks for our activity. So my worry is, I think kind of the performance continuous learning loop can be misused to actually stop the big leaps that we're getting in marketing. And I'm seeing less of those kind of big leaps, actually. I think we've kind of gone so far into the operational model now that we've actually forgot around kind of creativity and different thinking and kind of setting the benchmarks for those. So I think it will come back, by the way. I think we'll all understand that. I think people realise you can max out on kind of performance marketing and the marginal gains, and they get you so far. I think people will start to say, well, where do you get those bigger leaps from? How do you get there? Just make sure that your people feel supported enough to take those brave leaps, so that it's not just constantly justifying yourself through those marginal gains.
Yeah, otherwise we're going to end up in digital sameness, and
100%.
The differentiator is brand. So now we're going to get really into the nitty-gritty and talk about process and the operating model. When do you think process stop being the enemy of great creativity and start becoming the enabler of it?
I don't think process has ever been the enemy of creativity. I think it's the foundation. So I think creative-led, process-enabled. So we always had what we called a planning role, but was really focused on a lot of our internal operations. How do we make sure we had alignment on insights? And then the actual, almost like the physical build kind of the plans, pulling them together and making sure that we were integrating. So from that point of view, there was almost just a way of working, and it was somebody there that was going to be the champion of the operating model within our structure. And I think that was massively important to us, because everybody understood that, and you had somebody the whole time that could hold a team that was running at 1 million miles per hour to account on those things that were keeping structure and process in the right order.
And if you don't organise people, they can be brilliant, but they're running in different directions. And that's back to your point about the role being so important as the orchestrator and the integrator of all of these magnitude of things that marketing is doing. Yeah. I think we are heading towards an AI-enabled world, which requires us to codify and get much clearer on the way we do things around here. How do you make some of those decisions about prioritising what the brand needs to do to engage with customers? And what's next on your simplification agenda with that in mind?
I think it's about making sure that there's the right communication, you've got the right processes, which in a way are kind of forcing that kind of collaboration together. And then I think it's the right culture and mindset, as we've talked about, that kind of open honesty, that transparency, and setting the tone for that. If you get those, I think you've got a chance, but it's definitely not easy to
I think it's one
together.
of the biggest challenges of the industry at the moment. Do you think that as an industry, we've fallen into the trap of delivering quite a lot of stuff?
First came into the comparison category and we were talking about the sea of sameness. I've now had the opportunity to look at different categories and there's sea of sameness everywhere as well. I'm using the same phrase kind of 18 years down the track. So it's always been there. I just think with technology, I think the risk is bigger and we have to just hold that benchmark high on the creative work.
What is the most important part of a CMO's role?
It's about how do you bring everything together. So I see the CMO role as, you can call it an orchestrator or an integrator now. Fundamentally, with so many channels, so many options, so many different specialisms within the team, it's how do you make sure that this all becomes coherent for customers and is actually delivering against those customer needs.
What's next on your simplification agenda in the next role you take on?
The big theme for me is all about kind of integration and alignment. I'm really keen on making sure that AI almost goes across the whole of that operating model. So from the point of how do you get to insight quicker through to how do you then get to all of the creative variations you need, production models, and then back into measurement.
Are you optimistic about the future of marketing as an industry?
I kind of feel we're going full circle because we used to have control of all of the different levers. We used to have control of all of the P's. And I think we're going back there now as well. I think there was a long period of time where marketing, and perhaps we did this, just became synonymous with marketing communications. So yeah, I'm very optimistic because I think it's being recognised that the full spectrum of marketing and people that can do that are going to be highly valued moving forward.
Highly valued, agreed. And look, the industry's burning a bit. The Marketing Week survey that said that 60% of marketeers are burning and want to get out of the industry. It's really depressing because this industry at its best is brilliant.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you think will help bring back that joy into marketing?
Genuine marketing disruption, I think, is great because it's fun and there's kind of mischief at it as well. In terms of myself and how seriously I take marketing, I think sometimes I do just have to remind myself. And it's early on in my career, I remember one of my mentors just telling me, Mark, chill out. Marketing is massively important. There's actually really, really important stuff beyond marketing as well.
Piece of advice that you would give to someone stepping up into the CMO role?
So it starts with the very boring answer of objectives. I think if you're not busy trying to differentiate your proposition, and if you can't do that, if you're not busy being distinctive with your brand, then fundamentally you're part of the wallpaper. Yeah. So my advice is distinctiveness at all costs.
If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self starting at Compare the Market, what would it be?
I'd say to myself, just chill out a little bit and actually make sure you say thank you to all of the brilliant people that you've worked with along the way.
Thank you, Mark. That was brilliant. We need more Mark Viles in this industry. You've been an absolute pleasure to interview and you've given us a masterclass in marketing leadership.
Thank you so much for having me. And more Mark Viles is an absolutely terrifying thought.
Thank you for listening to ReModel, Tales of Marketing Transformation. Please visit our website to see more interviews from the series.